Ladies and gentlemen and fans of Backcourt Press, welcome back. It's been God knows how long. Zach and I both being college students and, just busy with our individual lives. Zach being in Los Angeles now for the semester, me staying in Philadelphia. We live in busy lives, and it's hard to keep up with, our Backcourt Press podcast and all that. But we're here. After we saw how bizarre the trade deadline was, we texted each other and said we got to do a podcast because to not be able to talk about this would be abysmal. And especially as two huge NBA fans, we had to come online and talk about the NBA trade deadline and everything that went down. So before we get started on the NBA talk, feel free to follow us on Instagram if you are watching on Facebook or YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at Backcourt Press. We are way more active on there, posting way more and really doing our thing on there. That's our main website. But we're going to try and get into more podcasts as we get closer to the postseason because obviously playoffs are right around the corner, only about 30 games away. And that's when the stuff that we're going to talk about today is actually going to be seen in full effect. I think without further ado, we should get right into it. I mean, the trade deadline was awesome. The coolest thing I thought about the trade deadline was about, 3 days ago, everyone thought this was going to be or even a week ago, people thought this was going to be a very mediocre, low-end trade deadline. Not a lot of people saw big moves. People said, maybe the Raptors will sell some players. Maybe a couple of the contending teams will get another role player that'll put them over the edge. What are the Lakers going to do? And then next thing you know, Kyrie Irving requests a trade, Kevin Durant gets traded, and the NBA just blows up, and the Western Conference is now undoubtedly one of the best. This is one of the best Western Conferences we've ever had in the history of basketball. When it comes to competition, it's up there. But
it's pretty good. It's in a time where the Eastern Conference has finally been surpassing. I mean, the West dominated from I'd say probably 1990 until 2019. So that's a solid 30-year period where the West was just completely dominant over the East. The last few years, it's finally seemed like that was kind of tipping over, going into the East's favor. Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, the up-and-coming Cavs, the Hawks, a lot of really good teams out there. But now with the Nets falling apart, you got a top 10 player, easily maybe top 5, and another top 20 player, both leaving the East, heading to the West. Got a lot of talent out there out West. I mean, Jokic, Durant, LeBron, Kawhi,
Curry,
Luka, Curry. There's so many. It's insane. That's probably 6 of the top 9 players in the league, all in the Western Conference right now. So it's pretty crazy stuff.
It is very impressive. And seeing, how these GMs within a matter of 24 hours just made this one of the most exciting trade deadlines was really cool. So let's just get right into the trades and how it's affecting, conferences and playoffs and everything. I want to start big. I think this was one of the, most talked about trades that happened. The Boston Celtics received Mike Muscala. But I'm just gonna breeze through some. I'm gonna start, have some fun. But I'm gonna breeze through some of the mediocre trades that happened. Celtics, just like I said, received Mike Muscala for a couple seconds. They get that front court depth that they're really looking for alongside Blake Griffin and Luke Cornett. Nothing really else to say. The Pelicans, this was an interesting deal. They traded for Josh Richardson, where they gave up Devontae Graham and 4 second-round picks for Josh Richardson. In my opinion, major finesse by the San Antonio Spurs to get 4 second-round picks for Josh Richardson.
As a Sixers fan who was there for Josh Richardson's time in Philly, we gave up Jimmy Butler to get him, and that was a disaster. Josh Richardson had one really good year in Miami a few years ago, and has pretty much fallen off the face of the earth since then. He's no better than a backup guard, maybe a 7th, 8th option on your team. That's his peak. So trading 4 second-round picks for him was a very questionable move in my opinion. But the Spurs got a good end to that. So look for them to build around Victor Wembanyama when they draft him this year.
Yeah, right. Another mediocre trade, the Hawks made a trade with the Houston Rockets, kind of just back-end bench players for back-end bench players, but the Rockets received 2 second-round picks. Another good move for a young rebuilding team. Trade that I wanted to talk about a little bit because I think it's an underrated trade. I know you're not a fan of this guy being a Syracuse student, but Darius Bazley was traded to the Phoenix Suns for Dario Saric and a second-round pick. Now, with the lack of any depth that the Phoenix Suns had, I was happy that they made the move. I don't think Darius Bazley is going to be a guy that really gives them crazy valuable minutes come playoff time, but 10 to 15 minutes a game, I'd rather have Darius Bazley over Dario Saric, so I see why they made the trade.
For a team that traded a lot of good assets and is pretty much lacking a bench, Bazley's a great pickup. I actually think people are kind of over-exaggerating, and we'll talk about the Suns later with the Kevin Durant trade, but I think people are over-exaggerating a little bit about how bad their bench is. I mean, Cam Payne, Landry Shamet, now Darius Bazley, like these are some decent pieces. Like if you can keep a solid 8, you keep a solid 8-9 man rotation, like that is not a terrible bench. There are worse benches in the league. It's not great. It's not like, oh, this is a top 5 bench in the league. But, I mean, you're looking at a decent squad and definitely makes the Durant trade worth it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Bazley's a good pickup, though. I liked him in OKC. I hated him for a while because of what he did to Syracuse. But I liked him at OKC. Solid player, young guy. I don't really think he has that high of a ceiling, but he can definitely give you some good bench minutes.
Exactly. A trade that I'm going to bring up that really confused me because I thought that the Hornets were going to sell a little bit more than they did, especially when you have good contracts like Terry Rozier that you could probably get some valuable future assets for. Gordon Hayward, you could probably get valuable future assets for. They trade Mason Plumlee to the Clippers for Reggie Jackson, who it's likely that he's going to get bought out. And actually, the rumors I've heard that he's actually going to go sign with Phoenix, which is very interesting if that ends up happening. And a 2028 second, which tells me Mason Plumlee was just worth a 2028 second-round pick in the trade market. Huge props to the Los Angeles Clippers for making that trade and getting that front court depth that they needed.
Can we talk Clippers for a second? I am not saying enough on how great their trade deadline was. They lost Reggie Jackson, who, let's be real, is not the same player he has been the last couple of years. Really struggling with efficiency, really struggling to score the ball this year. Has been a major disappointment for the Clippers. They got rid of him. They lose Luke Kennard. Great shooter.
I was going to bring up that trade.
Solid bench piece. But what they gain, I mean, they get Mason Plumlee, who I think is actually had a very underrated season this year.
Very underrated.
For now, a guy who's going to be coming off the bench for them, you're looking at maybe the best backup center in the NBA. You get Bones Highland.
For another guy, two second-round picks.
Love Bones Highland. You bring him off the bench, that is an immediate scoring piece. And in games where PG and Kawhi have to sit out, you can start him, and you never know, he could give you 25 on any given night. So I love that. And then the big one, obviously, Eric Gordon, which was a fantastic pickup. I know we were talking about this yesterday, but I can imagine a situation where they run Paul George at the point guard, Eric Gordon at shooting guard, and Kawhi at small forward, and you run that 3 on the perimeter because we've seen PG's point guard skills come out in the playoffs in 2021. And that could be a really, really deadly combination. Gordon's a guy who has not gotten much appreciation over the last few years, putting up really good numbers on a really bad team. He's a very efficient scorer. He can shoot the ball extremely well. He's a great, great glue guy, 5th starting option on a team who can give you 15, 16 a night if he's hitting his shots. I love that trade. That, I think, is the most slept-on trade of the deadline.
They also gave up John Wall, but it seemed like John Wall and the Clippers experiment wasn't really working out. So I wouldn't go even – it's to say I'd rather have Bones Highland on my team than John Wall at this point.
Easily.
And another thing that I want to bring up about the Clippers that I actually found very interesting that I didn't realize until I went on NBA.com is in the Eric Gordon deal, they also acquired 3 future second-round picks in giving up John Wall and Luke Kennard in that deal. Something I didn't realize. Even more of a win for the Clippers to get draft capital that clearly we saw 40, I believe the number was 49 second-round picks were traded at the trade deadline. These seconds are being thrown around for players.
I thought it was more, actually. You might be right, but I feel like it was more. It was just so many.
It seemed like more.
Teams were – it felt like 2K, honestly, where you're just throwing in like 4 second-round picks just to acquire a guy. I feel like every team was doing that, throwing in 3, 4, 5 second-round picks. It was really interesting. I feel like we've never seen that before, and it'll be interesting to see if this trend continues in future years.
Yeah. I mean, the Clippers, they were already one of the deepest teams in the NBA. Obviously, we know that they were probably making a run for Kyrie Irving, but when it comes to high-end assets that the Brooklyn Nets were looking for in return, I say high-end assets like it's not Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, but Terrence Mann and John Wall obviously wasn't getting the deal done. So when you have a team with Kawhi Leonard, who's been, unfortunately injury prone over the past couple of seasons, you have Paul George, who's been playing very well this season, having that depth behind them, with Norman Powell even playing really well as of recent, Zubac playing, the Zubac kind of minutes,
So
Robert
underrated.
Covington being a glue guy stretch four kind of guy. They just keep accumulating all these guys that they come in and play winning basketball. And I think for a team like the Clippers, when you're trying to surround pieces like Kawhi and PG, that's all you're looking for.
Exactly.
And I think they're on the trajectory now to be a tough team to play come playoff time.
I'm seeing on social media, I'm seeing the new Western Conference standings, or people saying who the best contenders are. I'm seeing a lot of Suns. I'm seeing a lot of Warriors. I'm seeing a lot of Mavericks. And to me, I mean, the Nuggets a little bit too, but I still think people sleep on the Nuggets a lot. I'm not seeing hardly anyone mentioning the Clippers in that conversation, which I think is pretty crazy because I will take the Clippers all day over the Mavericks and the Warriors based on, one, what we've seen so far this season, and two, based on what those teams did at the trade deadline to improve their teams. I think the Clippers are easily a top 3 team in the West right now. I mean, you look at what Kawhi Leonard has been doing in the last, I think it's like 15 games now, last month and a half. He's looking like a top 10 player in the world again, arguably top 5, putting up around 37 and 5 on ridiculous efficiency. And you know what happens when it comes to playoff time with Kawhi. He's going to raise that up even more. A lot of people sleeping on this Clippers team.
Yeah. We'll move into 2 4-team trades. This one, the first one I'm mentioning, actually involves your Philadelphia 76ers, who accumulated Jalen McDaniels from the Charlotte Hornets, which I think very underrated move that we could talk about soon. The Charlotte Hornets received Svi Mykhailiuk and some second-round picks. This was where the Trailblazers received Cam Reddish, Matisse Thybulle, and actually I did not know this, but Ryan Arcidiacono was thrown into that deal. Shout out to Ryan Arcidiacono. And the Knicks increased their depth and reconnect Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart in New York. So, out of this 14 deal, I think I want to hear your thoughts. I know as a 76er fan, you were very happy on the Jalen McDaniels thing. But speak about it a little bit, too, in regards to the Trailblazers and the Knicks side of it. Obviously, the Hornets, I don't really know what the Hornets were thinking here. But so we're not going to cover that. But go into the other teams.
Yeah, for the Blazers, I mean, I've been off the Matisse Thybulle bandwagon for a couple of years now. I've never really been a huge fan of his game. Yes, he brings really good on-ball defense, and he's really good.
Very, very good.
And he's great at disrupting passing lanes. His value on offense is negative. For a guy like normally when you have a good defender, you want him to at least be able to stand in the corner and shoot threes and contribute nothing else to the offense, and that's fine, and you can play those types of guys. Matisse Thybulle has never been a very good three-point shooter. He's extremely streaky. I think it was last season where he had the lowest three-point percentage on wide-open shots in the entire NBA. It's really sad to see because the guy, he has so much potential coming out of college. He's literally a phenomenal defender. He's made all defensive before. He's top 5.
He's made all defensive, playing like 15 to 20 minutes a night.
Yeah. But he has shown no signs of developing an offensive game. He can't attack off the dribble. He can't play make. He can't shoot. Really, the only thing that he can do is he's a good off-ball cutter, and he can get to the rim off of a pass and normally dunk it in. But, again, I'm curious to see why the Blazers were interested in him. Again, as a guy who just really has little to no offensive value whatsoever. I think the Sixers definitely improved getting Jalen McDaniels because you get another guy who's a very good defender but can also score the ball, can also shoot the ball. Provides you a little bit of that offensive value. So, yeah, I definitely like that for the Sixers. Not as much for the Trailblazers. As for Josh Hart, hasn't had the best season so far. He was coming off a year where he was really underrated. He had a great season last year.
Very great season.
I think that got slept on by a lot of people. This year, he started pretty much every game, and he's still averaging under 10 points per game. Of course, his role has been a little bit more limited than it has been in the past. So we'll see if that opens up with the Knicks. He provides a ton of value on both sides of the ball, though. So we'll see. I like that pickup. I feel like they gave up quite a bit for him, but we'll see if it can translate.
Yeah, and another piece that you didn't mention was the Cam Reddish to the Trailblazers, which I'm just happy to see Cam Reddish get playing time. I'll never forget watching that one series with Atlanta. And Cam Reddish all of a sudden dropped like 20 points in like 15 minutes. And Zach and I were sitting there like, Cam Reddish is a player. I don't understand why he's not getting minutes. And now he's going to a team that, they already have the lead ball handlers in Simons and Lillard. And now you're bringing on a kind of 3-and-D molded player without as great defense, but more so, he's got that catch and shoot three. Really, he's a better, he's also pretty good off the dribble. And you're mixing that in with the Trailblazers team. I think it's a pretty solid fit. And honestly, I'm just excited to watch Cam Reddish get minutes somewhere he goes, because it's been too long since we've seen Cam Reddish play a game of basketball.
Agreed. 100% agreed.
Yeah. And then we're going from your team to my team. If you had asked me a year and a half ago if I would be happy that James Wiseman would be getting traded for 5 second-round picks, I would have told you you're crazy. But here we are at the trade deadline, where there was a 4-team deal where the Detroit Pistons put together the Bust brothers in James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley. James Wiseman gets moved to the Detroit Pistons for Saddiq Bey. Saddiq Bey gets immediately moved to the Atlanta Hawks, who give the Golden State Warriors 5 second-round picks. And Kevin Knox, don't forget about Knox, Mr. Fortnite Blazer when he got drafted. And then those second-round picks were traded immediately to the Portland Trailblazers, where the Warriors bring back Gary Payton II. I want to hear thoughts on this trade in your eyes. Obviously, nothing crazy, but it might be a trade that gets the Warriors that defensive presence they need off the bench. Other than that, let's hear what you guys say.
Can we get those receipts? I know we did this podcast back around the 2019 draft or 2020 draft time. Can we get the receipts on when I said that James Wiseman was – I think I had him at 9 or 10 in that draft class, that he was probably the most overrated player in the class. You were all about the Warriors taking him. It's good. It's good to see this. Not that I'm praying on his downfall or anything. I normally don't do that unless their name is Ben Simmons. But Wiseman.
Killian Hayes now.
Nah. Killian he's still gonna be good. I got faith in Killian. Wiseman, yeah. I mean, he hasn't really. I mean, injuries have killed him, but he hasn't really shown any ability to be a starting center in this league. We'll see what the Pistons can do with him. They have, with Cade Cunningham out for the season, they have just a lot of really young, really raw, really unpolished players. We'll see. It's almost like the Magic were last year, beginning of this year, where you just bring on so much young talent onto the team, see which guys can really step up and produce. Honestly, I even think I like Bagley more than Wiseman at this point for the Pistons, which is saying a lot. But we'll see how that goes. I think that's definitely something that we can analyze in the coming weeks when we actually get to see Wiseman on the court for them. As for Saddiq Bey, I love that pickup by the Hawks. I think that was a really good pickup. He's a really good defender. He's a really good shooter. He's a great compliment for Trae Young. I think you take what DeAndre Hunter does on the court. I think Saddiq Bey does pretty much everything better than Hunter. So I think this is really an upgrade for the Hawks. And, I mean, the Hawks are going to have a lot of decisions to make in the upcoming offseason on what they do with Trae Young. Is DeJounte Murray their future? But I think Bey is definitely a great pickup for them and gives them a lot of value. And they didn't really have to give up all that much, in my opinion, to get him. So I like that pickup. I'll let you go into the Warriors with Gary Payton, because I've told you my thoughts on that before, which is a little bit more pessimistic than yours, but feel free.
Listen, when it comes to how the Warriors have played so far, we've been horrible on the road. And, we have Anthony Lamb getting a lot of minutes a game recently. It just seems like the depth at our wing positions and wing defenders especially has not been there. We have Klay Thompson, who will drop 42 on like 75% shooting one game, and then the next game he'll drop 11 on 30% shooting. So I think, and he's also not the defender that he once was. And especially when you have a backcourt of Jordan Poole, especially, and Steph Curry getting a lot of minutes sometimes, we've been relying very heavily on Dante DiVincenzo to not only be a secondary ball handler, especially for the second unit, but also to play a lockdown defense. Now, I will say the one game that really impressed me from Dante DiVincenzo was when Damian Lillard got locked up for the last 3 minutes of the game by Dante. And I believe he only scored 2 points in the last 3 minutes. And that's when I was like, okay, Dante's finally finding his role with us. But at the same time, when it comes to defensive presence, and especially when it comes to team culture, Gary Payton II is exactly what the Warriors needed and were looking for. Especially, Wiseman's been so on and off. The drama that's come with him. It's like we should play him minutes, but he doesn't fit the role, and then he doesn't play, but we're better when he doesn't play. It was just time to free him from our system. It sucks because I think his potential is through the roof. And looking back, God, I wish we could have pulled the trigger on like a trade for him for Miles Turner or something or even him for Jakob Poeltl back,
or drafted LaMelo Ball,
or drafted LaMelo Ball. But when it comes to what his value is at right now, Curly, it couldn't have been that high if the best player we could have gotten back from was Saddiq Bey. I'm sure that Bob Myers was shopping him around. I'm sure a lot of teams were like, we'll take the chance on him, but we're not going to give up much because Curly, you guys don't want him. And when a team shows that they don't want a player, trade value decreases immensely. So it sucks that this is how Wiseman had to go out. And it sucks that, Draymond or Andre Iguodala couldn't have more of a winning impact on his play because he's super talented. I mean, when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, James Wiseman can basically do about everything with a lot of room to grow. The issue was the Warriors have always thrived in their front courts when they have players like Andrew Bogut, Kevon Looney, David Lee, Draymond Green, these kind of guys that they don't need the ball in their hands and they're good playmakers. When you try and add an offensive talent to the Warriors system, it just doesn't work. Hence why I'm almost happy he's gone, and I'm happy we got a culture guy back for him in Gary Payton II, who I loved him last year, played huge minutes for us in the finals, and GP2 is back, baby. I'm excited.
I just can't believe you just pulled David Lee out of your ass on that one. That was not what I expected.
That's funny, but
all NBA Warriors big man though in the early 2010s.
Yep, got MVP votes that one year. He was like 13th or 14th in MVP voting. I'll never forget that. One thing I do want to say about the Atlanta Hawks acquiring Saddiq Bey is I find it very interesting that I feel as though they have three of almost the same type of player on their roster in Saddiq, Hunter, and then a younger version in AJ Griffin. I feel like all three of these guys do basically the exact same thing on the court. And it's like, how much small forward minutes and power forward minutes are there, especially with, John Collins staying a part of the team, which I never understood. The fact that they allowed John Collins to pursue his own trade and he still could not get traded has to say something. Like, there's got to be something behind the scenes we don't know about. But I hope that they run these two small forward lineups of like Saddiq Bey and Hunter, or AJ Griffin and Bey, because I'd like to see them utilize, a 5 out kind of offense around Trae Young. Obviously, I really like Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella. It just seems like they're just adding depth, but you have a ceiling when Trae Young is your best player. Unfortunately, it's starting to show, and I don't know if Saddiq Bey is going to even put them into like true playoff contention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said earlier, it kind of reminds me of the situation with the Magic guards last year, where they just racked up young, talented guards. Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, pains me to say, Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, RJ Hampton, and it's just like, which one of these guys is going to break out and be that guy? Hunter's had a chance for a few years now, and he's shown flashes. But he hasn't really been able to emerge as a guy who was drafted top 5 overall. I think people forget that. He was a very high draft pick. And he has now had almost, 5 years? I think he's 5 years in the league. And has not shown anything better than being – he's not shown that he's anything better than a low-end starter. So I don't mind this move. I think Bey has proven that he's been better in the past. And I think Bey definitely has the right to take that role from Hunter in that offense.
That's fair. I like that input. We'll move on. We have 2 more trades that I want to go over before we get into the Brooklyn Nets selling. Mm-hmm. The first one is the Toronto Raptors staying put with their team. It was reported that both the Memphis Grizzlies and Indiana Pacers offered 3 first-round picks for OG Anunoby, but they decided to keep him and trade Kem Birch and a 2024 first-round pick to the San Antonio Spurs to finally get the center that they can put next to Pascal and Scotty in Jakob Poeltl. I want to hear your thoughts. And does this make them a playoff team?
I mean, I feel like the East is pretty wide open right now. In terms of like the bottom of it, obviously the top 3 are set in stone.
The top 3.
But even if so, like, what does this accomplish for the Raptors, right? You got a team right now that is at best the 6 or 7 seed in the East. Like maybe you're escaping the play-in. That's probably your ceiling. You're gonna get swept in the first round or losing 5 games in the first round to the Celtics or the Sixers or the Bucks. Siakam's great, but they've been shopping Van Vliet. They've been shopping and OG Anunoby. I don't know. I also think Nick Nurse had a great run his first year as a head coach. Helps that you had Kawhi. I haven't been very impressed with him in recent years.
I haven't either.
He overplays his top guys way too much, which I think really contributes to why they lose a lot of games. I mean, I think this year Siakam, Van Vliet, and I think it's OG are all top 5 in minutes played this season.
I think it is those three, yeah.
I don't think that's going to be sustainable for them. Pirtle as a player, I love. I've always been on the Pirtle train. You know that I've been hyping him up for years now. Very underrated big man. Can rebound really well. Great inside scorer. Really good post presence. He's your typical center that gets really underappreciated in today's game. He does a lot of great stuff. And I like moving Siakam back to power forward. I feel like that's more his natural position. It allows him to play make a little bit easier and score more from the perimeter, mid-range. Even if the paint's a little bit more clogged up, he doesn't really operate as much around the paint as a lot of other big men do. So I think this can really benefit him as well. But as for the Raptors' direction in general, I'm just not sure where their franchise is looking to be headed right now. I mean, you got Scotty Barnes, last year's Rookie of the Year, who's had a bit of a sophomore slump, you could say, putting up pretty similar numbers to last year, not really showing much improvement. Do you want to build around him, let him be the guy, and rebuild everything else? Do you keep Siakam and Barnes and trade everybody else? This core isn't going to win a championship. I hate to say it. You would need a big time star to sign with them.
Oh, yeah, no.
In order
when it comes
to turn this Raptors team into a contender, a guy like Kawhi Leonard might work, but we'll see it.
Yeah, right. When it comes, I looked it up. When it comes to player minutes average per game, Pascal leads the league at 37.5 minutes. Fred VanVleet is third in 37 minutes. You have OG playing 36 minutes a game and Scotty Barnes playing 35 minutes a game. It's ridiculous. It's not. That's not how you coach winning basketball, especially when it comes postseason and these guys are already burnt out. So yeah, I think Jakob Poeltl. I see where Masai Ujiri could sit there and say we haven't had a really good center next to our core. Let's see what happens when we add a center. So in my head, I'm thinking, this is a trade where they're going to experiment with how a center works, and then come this off season, that's when they're going to really unload players. They're going to blow up their team a little bit more. But I would have liked to see at least one move, like even Gary Trent getting moved, because now it looks like he's going to come off the bench. Like I would have liked to see just them trade one of these guys at the deadline. But
I'm also interested to see what they do with VanVleet, because they refuse to play any other guards in this entire offense. I mean, Gary Trent, shooting guard, small forward a little bit, but VanVleet is usually the only guard who gets extensive minutes. And when VanVleet comes out, they just let Scotty Barnes play point guard. So I'm really interested to see what would happen if they do trade VanVleet. Do they let Scotty run point guard? Do they keep him at forward? It's a team that's really interesting.
Where's those Delano Banton minutes coming? I need to see Delano Banton back out there. And then the last trade we're going to get into, I don't think I was going to say we'll breeze past it, but I don't think, knowing us, we will. The 3-team deal between the Los Angeles Lakers, Minnesota Timberwolves, and Utah Jazz. Now, this was a big trade, obviously, because it involves LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, where they received D'Angelo Russell back in LA. Hopefully, everyone keeps their phones on Do Not Disturb. Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt. The Minnesota Timberwolves received Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and 3 second-round picks. And the Utah Jazz received Russell Westbrook and the 2027 first-round pick from the Lakers, which could be extremely valuable come 2027. Now, it looks like Russell Westbrook will be getting bought out from Utah, especially after all the things that he said when he was back in OKC about the Utah fans and all that. I've seen reports that the top teams to sign Westbrook are both the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Clippers. I don't really want to get into that now, though. I kind of want to wait to actually see where Westbrook goes before we talk about it. But let's really talk about this from the Los Angeles Lakers side. They're still sitting 13th in the conference with 28 games remaining, but they just now have a really good 8 to 9 man rotation around LeBron and AD. Talk to me about this Los Angeles Lakers trade.
Win. I don't think a single team that made it in this trade lost at all. For the Timberwolves, I'll get into that quickly before we talk about the Lakers. I really like Conley as an upgrade over D'Lo. I think D'Lo is the better player overall. In terms of fit, though, I don't love the D'Lo Ant backcourt. I don't really think that fit ever really worked. So I think Conley, you get more of a veteran guy who plays a little bit more off ball, let Ant do his thing a little bit more. Conley's a little bit of a better defender. He's a more consistent three-point shooter. I know D'Lo can get hot and it's a little streaky sometimes, but Conley's normally pretty consistently good three-point shooter. I think you'll see a little bit more of point Ant now, which should be exciting to see. Obviously, I know Mike Conley's a point guard, but Ant will definitely take over more of the roles playmaking in that offense without D'Lo. I like that deal a lot for the Timberwolves. For the Lakers, also love it. Absolutely
Amazing.
love it. I mean, this is what Lakers fans have been wanting for years, right? You get Westbrook off the team. You get a shooter in Malik Beasley. You get a solid playmaking point guard and shooter in D'Angelo Russell. And you get Jared Vanderbilt, who's a really, really good. You can call him a backup big, or I think he could be a really good complement down low to Anthony Davis if you start him at the power forward spot and move LeBron back to the small forward. So they have a number of avenues in which they can navigate this. But even if you're just looking at it straight up, a D'Lo, Beasley, LeBron, Vanderbilt, AD starting lineup, if that's what they're going to run with, that's a really good team. And that fits way better than anything the Lakers have put on the court in the last 3 years. So I really like that. The issue is going to be, like you said,
go ahead.
I was going to say 28 games left, and they're 13 in the West, and they're 3 games out of the play-in. They're going to 500 isn't going to cut it. They're going to need to win probably 17, 18 of these games. They're going to need to start dominating, and that's not going to happen if, as we saw last night, LeBron sat out. And it raises the question to me: does LeBron genuinely care? And I'm not trying to disrespect him. I know this was a huge moment for him, getting the all-time points record, all that. But does he genuinely care about winning at this point in his career? Does it matter to him if they make the playoffs, if they make the play-ins? Because I don't think he'd be sitting games out if it genuinely did at this point, because they need every single game that they can get. And I know there was a lot of social media this morning about Anthony Davis not seemingly excited about LeBron getting the point record because they were losing to the Thunder in that game. And I love that mindset. I'm really happy to see that. And I think Anthony Davis is very locked in. He came back from his injury earlier than he was supposed to. He seems like he wants to win. He wants to get to the postseason. I want to see that out of LeBron too. I want him to be playing every single game that he possibly can and continuing to put up the numbers that he did while he was trying to break the scoring record. Because we've seen that he's still capable of doing it. It's just a matter, is he going to take a step back now? Does he care as much? We'll see. But that's I think is going to be a huge part of whether the Lakers end up advancing as far as they could with this roster, or if they end up missing the playoffs or losing the play-in or whatnot.
Yeah. One thing I'm happy about is we're not going to get as many, Troy Brown Jr. and Juan Toscano-Anderson minutes. Obviously, JTA was traded, but that with those minutes being replaced now by Mo Bamba, who was traded for Patrick Beverley, and even you have Dennis Schroeder now coming off the bench, who just had a really good game with LeBron out. Now we're seeing him go back to his normal 6-man kind of backup point guard role, and you even bring in Rui Hachimura, who's looked amazing next to these guys. They finally have a really good 9-man competitive team. I am interested to see what I'm hoping that we get out of the next couple of weeks is to see just Anthony Davis just dominate. That's what I'm looking forward to. He was an MVP candidate in the beginning of the year. Obviously, the injury came on and affected him, but this is AD's team. Whether or not people are going to say we've seen what LeBron can do at this point. LeBron's going to put up 30 a game, but it's going to be up to Anthony Davis to see to me if Anthony Davis can bring them into the playoffs. Yep. And the scary thing is, hypothetically, they get the 7-8 seed or 7-6 seed. They make go on the huge run. They have a chance to play, the Memphis Grizzlies or the Sacramento Kings in the first round, where I think those are really good series for the Lakers. Especially, the Kings. I'd be very interested to see how the Kings match up against the Lakers. I think the Grizzlies would be more of a challenge, but I still think the Lakers have the star talent where they could get over those teams. They play Denver. I'd be a little more scared. I think it goes 6 or 7. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and count out LeBron James in any playoff series if he can make it. So, yeah, I agree with what you were saying a lot, though, about 28 games left and all that good stuff, because we'll see if the Lakers can even make the playoffs or even the play-in tournament. You there? Hello. Just want to make sure I for some reason. Oh, there we go. Okay. Cool. Let's move on to now the big time trades. Let's have some fun. The big time trades, the Brooklyn Nets obviously were on a roll. They're sitting at the 4th seed in the East before Kyrie Irving decided to request a trade. Kyrie, it was reported that he didn't get the deal that he wanted in Brooklyn. A part of the 4-year deal that they offered him, there was something that had to do with championship aspirations, which Kyrie was not excited about. And he said he lost all trust in the team. And next thing you know, he requests a trade. He gets traded to the Dallas Mavericks for Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and a future first-round pick. Very, very interesting move. I think on both sides, I wonder what Kyrie Irving's trade value really did look like. But at the same time, I'm very interested to see, how Kyrie and Luka can make this backcourt up, and can their offense really take over? And even with the Dallas Mavericks being, ranked 26th or 25th defensively, is it okay to? Is your mic okay? Sorry, it says you're muted, so I just wanted to double check that. But regarding Kyrie Irving and all that good stuff, I'm interested to see if the Dallas Mavericks, if their offense can overtake their defensive struggles. I know this year they rank in the bottom 5 defensively, even around Luka and all that good stuff. Even with how good offensively they've been, they sit currently at the 4 seed in the West after that big win against the Clippers, where Kyrie Irving led that Dallas Mavericks team and took over. But regarding the trade, I think it was a kind of a win-win for both sides. The drama's finally over in Brooklyn, and I think that part has a huge it's finally done. You had the James Harden and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving time where everything just went wrong. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, unfortunately. And it sucks to look back and say that, because this could have been one of the most exciting teams we've ever seen play. But it didn't turn out to be. So in regards to the Brooklyn Nets now, we just saw Cam Thomas drop 40 points in 3 straight games. That was incredible. Obviously, he followed that up with 0 points in the first half of the last game. But they're looking to build this defensive-minded team around Cam Thomas. I don't know exactly what the Brooklyn Nets direction is, as they traded, Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns as well for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. Jay Crowder got flipped to Milwaukee. And a bunch of picks. Obviously, the Brooklyn Nets got their picks back in a time where they, gave up all their picks to Houston. But now they are Kyrie and Kevin Durant-less, and even James Harden-less, and they have Ben Simmons, Mikal Bridges, Nick Claxton's crazy defensive lineup around Cam Thomas. But I wanted to get
talking Nets.
Yeah, now that you're back, no worries about that. Let's get back to
the sun was overheating.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, sorry, the sun was overheating my laptop.
No, you're good. Let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks. Let's start off with Dallas. Obviously, so we saw them beat the Clippers the other night with Kyrie Irving. We also saw Reggie Bullock hit 5 3-pointers in the first quarter. What were your initial thoughts about the Kyrie Irving trade to Dallas?
Initially, I loved it. In hindsight, I still love the trade. I think people are a little over-exaggerating the Mavericks right now. I don't think trading for Kyrie solved their problems. What it does is it keeps Luka Doncic happy. I think it keeps Luka Doncic happy. And that is the number one priority for Mavericks, because as long as you have Luka, you can contend. And the whole goal of their franchise should be to keep him happy. Same thing with the Cavs when they had LeBron James. They weren't able to keep him happy, so he left. And I think it's the same thing with the Mavericks. If they can keep Luka happy, they keep him on their team, they're inevitably going to win a ring at some point. So you just have to keep him around, right? And I think acquiring a second star, especially a guy who's a really good off-ball scorer, also another secondary playmaker, gives a lot of the same help to Luka that Jalen Brunson did last year. I think it's a great start. However, the difference between last year's Mavericks and this year's Mavericks is last year's Mavericks were a top 6 defensive team. They were really good on defense. And when you had Luka carrying the offensive load and a lot of good pieces on defense, and it all coming together and working, that's how you make a run. This year's Mavericks are bottom 5 defensively this year. I don't know if it's the acquisition of Christian Wood. I know he's always been a pretty bad defender, obviously helping on the offensive end, but not really helping them on defense. I can't really put my finger to what exactly it is this year. I know Brunson was also a good defensive piece for them, but they have looked horrible on defense this year. They give up like 120 points almost every single game, and that's not going to change with the Kyrie trade. So while I think the Mavericks are better and they might be putting themselves in the championship conversation, they didn't fix all their problems. Other teams in the West, I still like better than them. I still like the Nuggets, the Suns, the Clippers. I think they're all better contenders at this point than the Mavericks are. But when you have Luka Doncic and you have Kyrie Irving on your team, you can always make something happen.
Yeah. And I don't think they gave up too much. I believe a lot of people laughed at them when the Mark Cuban came out and said, we're willing to trade Dorian Finney-Smith if it's for a star. And a lot of people were like, Dorian Finney-Smith is not going to get you no star. And then next, they flipped him and the Dallas Mavericks secondary primary ball handler in Spencer Dinwiddie for Kyrie. And to me, whether or not you want to say Dorian Finney-Smith's impact was that huge defensively, they were already bad defensively. So if you're already going to be bad defensively, you may as well add more offense. And that's kind of where my head went to. It's like you got Kyrie Irving, you got 2 of the top 3 fourth quarter scoring players in the league. So that's scary. If you're the opposing team, hypothetically, if the Dallas Mavericks are able to, sneak a 2-point lead or only be down 2 in a game 6, I don't know how I'm going to how I'm going to say they're going to lose in the fourth quarter when you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving down the stretch. That's where I'm saying, it was worth the trade. Kyrie Irving is such an amazing talent when it comes to being on the basketball court. One thing I do want to say, he has not signed his extension yet. I think that is very, very interesting, that there still is a possibility that Kyrie gets up and leaves after this season, because you never know with this man. But in my head, it was worth it, as Mark Cuban wants to keep Luka Doncic around. He kept just bringing in these role players, seeing how they play next to Luka. Now you have a secondary star. You're showing Luka, we're going to put players around you that want to win. And that's what they did. Hence why I think this trade was worth it.
So highlight that last comment down there from Zachary Goldman.
Yep.
Bring it up here. I love that. As I mentioned earlier, Nuggets, Suns, Clippers, I think are your top 3. They're definitely my top 3. Whether you want to put the Nuggets or the Suns one, I think you can go either way. I definitely want to see Phoenix play before I can say that they're definitely the one. But on paper, I think it's hard to say they're not. And then, you got the Mavericks, Grizzlies, Lakers afterwards. Again, I like the Lakers. We just talked about that. But I'm not 100% sure if they're going to be able to get to that point by the end of the season. I like the Mavs 4. Grizzlies, I think they are bound to be a first-round exit this year. I was talking with my Grizzlies fan buddy the other day. He thinks that's absurd, but I just think a lot of these other teams are improving. They're making moves. They're looking better. And the Grizzlies are arguably, I think, are they the worst team on the road this year, or in the West? I saw a stat about that recently. That they're struggling on the road in the West, or no, they're struggling against other teams in the West. I think they're the only team above 500 in the West that has a losing record against Western Conference teams. So they're having a hard time.
After John Morant said that.
Yep, they're having a hard time beating their best competition. So I don't know. I'm not as high on the Grizzlies this year as I was last year, or even coming into the year.
Very interesting. Really quickly.
Also, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Zachary Goldman, but we already discussed the Wiseman trade. So if you want, you can come back and watch the episode. I think we hit it around the 20-25 minute mark. You'll get to hear our full thoughts about it then.
Yep. And then we also got another thing that we weren't going to bring up because this is more of a trade deadline talk, but Chris Simmons saying Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, and Pascal Siakam made the All-Star team as replacements. And one thing I want to point out is that Lauri Markkanen is an All-Star starter. Huge congrats to him. I think that news in and of itself is incredible. The fact that Lauri Markkanen is, deemed an All-Star, it blows my mind to think that. And to think that if you put this Lauri in Cleveland, that Cleveland team would become one of the top, would be right there with the other top 3 teams in the East. But they moved on from him. I just think it's so funny to say that. But huge props to Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, and Pascal, and even Laurie, who got moved up, and John Morant, who got moved up to a starter. All 5 of those guys completely deserved it off of how they played this season. I'm so happy to see Ant and De'Aaron especially get it in the West, because I thought both of those guys, the way that they handled themselves after not getting the nod was really, really professional. And so now that they did get the injury replacement, at the end of the day, it gets put on their resume as an all-star. And I think that right there is pretty cool. And huge shout out to Pascal. He deserved it the first time around. I'm shocked that it took this much for him to get it. But yeah. And then you also said Anthony Edwards making the all-star game and James Wiseman getting traded. Tough world. As a Warriors fan, yeah, I know.
And
not fun.
And Killian Hayes looking better lately.
Yeah, Killian Hayes is up to 30% shooting from the field. But obviously,
also,
we just go ahead.
To respond to his other to Zach's other comment down there, we also talked about the Raptors already. So check back in around the 30-minute mark, I would say.
Yep.
And yes, we agree that didn't make any sense, but we're pretty much on the same page with you on that.
Yeah. And now we just went over the that's funny, Zach. God damn it. But
you're about to listen to the KD stuff though, so you got to the good stuff.
Yeah, we saved it for the last 15 minutes of the podcast to really now dive into the entirety of the Western Conference, because right now the Phoenix Suns sit at the 6th seed, 4.5 games behind the Memphis Grizzlies at the 2 seed, but they traded Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, who got moved to the Milwaukee Bucks, which sorry, Beans, you're funny. Who got moved to the Milwaukee Bucks, an underrated pickup that we didn't talk about, but I think, could really help the Milwaukee Bucks come playoff time against, either of the top 2 teams in the Philadelphia 76ers and the Boston Celtics. But we're just going to dive right into the Phoenix Suns. The Brooklyn Nets get their trade, like their draft pick capital back. Obviously, they gave it all away for 16 games of Harden, Kyrie, and Durant. But now Kevin Durant is on the Phoenix Suns, teaming up with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and the guy that everyone in Phoenix hates for some reason, DeAndre Ayton. And another interesting thing is that the Phoenix Suns were able to bring back TJ Warren in this deal, which I think was a super underrated depth pickup, especially if he's going to come off the bench or start. I don't know who they're going to run with it with him or Torrey Craig. But Kevin Durant got moved. He's in Phoenix. Floor is yours.
First, I'm going to talk about the Nets first.
Oh, go ahead. Oh my God, let's go. Let's do it.
Everyone's talking Phoenix. I like this new Nets team. Think about it. All right,
I love
first,
it.
Let's go. Last night, I'm not trying to overreact here, but they won their first game as a new team. Mikal didn't play. Claxton didn't play. Cam Johnson didn't play. Cam Thomas shot 3 of 16 from the field, and they beat
0 points in the first half, 20 points in the second half.
And they beat a healthy Chicago team. This starting lineup, when they're healthy, could be Cam Thomas, right? Spencer Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nick Claxton, where you have elite offensive guards, an elite defensive front court. You got Ben Simmons also coming off the bench, who you never know if he's actually going to help or hurt a team. But, when he's playing well, he can do his thing. Also be a good defensive piece. You got Cam Johnson as well. You still have Seth Curry, Joe Harris, Patty Mills. I mean, Royce O'Neal. Like, this is a good team with it's deep. They're good on offense. They're good on defense. I know Beans down here was saying he feels most for Mikal Bridges. Bro got screwed. Maybe he loses his shot to win a ring. The Suns weren't winning a ring regardless with him on there. And he gets a chance to be arguably the number 1 guy on this Nets team. He can go out and prove to people that he can be a number 1 offensive option, or maybe number 2 offensive option if Cam Thomas takes over that role. But everyone knows how good Mikal Bridges is. I mean, he's a phenomenal defender, arguably the best defensive wing in the NBA.
Top two in Defensive Player of the Year voting last year.
Yeah, really a fantastic 3-point shooter as well. He's a limited as a shot creator for himself and for others, but it's something that he's had a chance to improve on this year with Devin Booker's injury, and he'll have a chance to improve on it even more now. So in this offense, I like this team a lot. I think they're gonna. I mean, obviously they'll still make the playoffs because of the record that they already have, but I don't think they're gonna fall off all that much. I think they'll probably hang around 500 throughout the rest of the year, which means they'll end with a winning record, I'm sure. And I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't think they'll do anything in the playoffs. I mean, they're still a young team that has almost no experience playing together. They'll probably get swept, but they got a good look for the future. They got a lot of draft picks out of that. This is probably the most optimistic time to be a Nets fan probably since James Harden asked out.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm looking at the standings right now. The Brooklyn Nets are sitting at the 5 seed, but they're 3 games ahead of the Miami Heat, who are the 6 seed. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how close Miami is going to be to catching them. When I'm looking at these rosters, I almost get more excited over the Brooklyn Nets roster than I do the Miami Heat roster. Obviously, you have Jimmy and Bam, but when it comes to overall, the Brooklyn Nets aren't starting Hayward Highsmith every other game or Gabe Vincent every other game. They have depth, and I think when you have to rebuild what they did, obviously they went through such a difficult time period. With the owner not even wanting to trade Kyrie to the Lakers because that's where he wanted to go, and then you have to move on from Kevin Durant 6 months after he already requested a trade in the offseason. And it's like everything blew up and went horribly. Now that it's done, they have very, very solid pieces and a very solid culture. Like this team reminds me a lot of the D'Angelo Russell Nets, where I just feel like they go out there and they almost have nothing to lose. They know they're not going to be the most talented team day in and day out, but you have Cam Thomas who can drop 70 out of nowhere. I swear this guy can just score the ball like it's nothing. Why can't they win a playoff game? Like they can take a game from, the Cleveland Cavaliers if they end up making against them. I could even see them taking a game against like the Bucks because the Bucks for some reason always lose a game in the first round. So it's like I would love to see. I really hope the Brooklyn Nets do stay where around they are because I'd love to see them go up against like the Cavaliers or the Bucks or even the 76ers just to see how they perform against a top team because I think they're going to be able to hold their own enough where they might lose in 4 or lose in 5, but I promise you those games will be closer when you watch them than you think they will be, or than they look, than the series looks.
Fair point. Let's throw up that comment from that Beans just put down there. I think pretty much any team that has Ben Simmons would be in an exponentially better spot if they didn't have Ben Simmons. And I think that's something we've learned in the past. You could, like I said, I don't even think Simmons should start for this team. I think their best starting lineup is Thomas, Dinwiddie, Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Nick Claxton. And you bring Simmons
Johnson off the bench, Simmons off the bench, Patty Mills off the bench as an off-ball scorer.
Like Claxton has been phenomenal this season. So underrated.
Fantastic.
He's a top 10 center in the NBA. I'm going to call him a top 10 center in the NBA.
He might be top 7
this year. Yeah, he's played like it this year. He's an elite defender, elite rim protector, really good rim runner, can score the ball on the inside. Great player. And if that complemented well, if you have Dinwiddie, Thomas, Bridges, and Finney-Smith on the outside shooting the ball, that's really good shooting. And, you might lack a little bit of the playmaking you had, obviously, when you had Kyrie and Durant on the team. But, I mean, Dinwiddie is still a pretty good playmaker. So you got a team of guys who can shoot the ball, can spread the floor, who can defend. That's a team that's going to at least be 500, at least be a low-end playoff team at a minimum.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, let's move into it. Here's my first question to you. The Phoenix Suns acquire Kevin Durant. He teams up with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Ayton, Torrey Craig, TJ Warren, Jock Landale, the bench that we talked about earlier. If the Phoenix Suns don't win a ring in the next 2 years, what does that say about Kevin Durant? Does it say anything? Should it have any effect?
I'm not going to – listen, because this goes into how I rank players as well. Context means everything. If Kevin Durant comes out this season and averages 35 points per game in the playoffs and they lose in the, say, second round maybe because Devin Booker has a really underwhelming series or say Chris Paul plays awful, I'm not gonna go out and say, oh, Durant can't win a championship on the I think that's absurd because you have to look at how they play. Now, if Durant comes out and he shits the bed and he sells, then yeah, I'd be like, yeah, Durant obviously is proving that he's not able to do it with a team of this caliber when he should be able to. I think he has a roster around him where they should win it all. He could and should be expected to at least make the finals with this team, conference finals at an absolute bare minimum. But I can't fault him for not winning it when we don't know how they don't win it yet.
True.
Like, what if Devin Booker gets injured? What if he misses the rest of I mean, he's already injured, right? He already had a big injury this season. You don't know if he's going to come back fully healthy, if he's going to come back to the form that he was at beforehand, right? So I'm not able to say if Durant, what this will do to Durant's legacy if he doesn't win a ring, when I don't know how it's going to turn out yet. But at the very least, we should be expecting this team to be a conference finals team. And the next year, when they get it all together, I think it's hard sometimes for teams at the trade deadline that come together to be able to advance all the way to the finals or win a ring, even when they're extremely talented, because they don't have the time to build that chemistry and build I guess the chemistry is the word I was looking for. But I mean, we'll see. I still think that they should be heavily favored to be a top 2-3 team to win the finals.
One thing I want to say is I know both of us are big Nikola Jokic fans, and we back him a lot of the time because a lot of people don't think he should be an MVP. If it gets to the conference finals and both teams are fully healthy and the Denver Nuggets eliminate the Phoenix Suns in 6-7 games, I'm not going to lie, I would be ecstatic about it. To be able to sit here and disprove everyone's theory that Nikola Jokic can't play in the playoffs because for some reason that's a thing, even though Jokic just averages 30-point triple-doubles in the playoffs but loses in 5 because Monte Morris is the team's second best player. I'd have the biggest smile on my face. Now, here's the thing. I'm not rooting against the Phoenix Suns. I think that this was the best trade for the Phoenix Suns, knowing that Chris Paul's on the decline. He's had a pretty bad year when I'm comparing him to Chris Paul. We've seen how the Phoenix Suns have reacted with DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton tried to sign somewhere else. Phoenix Suns didn't let him, and then he was put in trade rumors for a while. This is it. This is it for Durant. This is it for Chris Paul. And I'm super excited to watch these guys go out together. I just can't wait to see how they play on the court. I want to see if Kevin Durant comes in and tells Devin Booker, you do your thing. You run the team still. I'll do my thing. Like what could have done or what was done in Golden State with Steph Curry. Or if Kevin Durant comes in and says, this is my team now, I'm going to carry the offensive load, which I think could maybe start some issues. I don't know. It's Kevin Durant. He kind of just shuts up and does the work. I trust Monty Williams. I do trust Monty Williams as a coach to be able to really put all this talent together on the floor.
I think Kevin Durant is one of the most portable players in the NBA, where his style of play fits on just about any team because he's such a good off-ball scorer. Where he shows up, he doesn't demand attention to the ball. He doesn't need the ball in his hands all that much. But he gets it, and when he does, he scores. And his ability to score creates offense for everybody else on the team because he has to command so much defensive attention that I just don't see it being a fit issue just because he's one of those guys. It's like Steph Curry too. Like you put those guys on any team, it doesn't matter who's on that team is going to be elite because they bring that scoring gravity, that playmaking that improves everybody else around them. And they're extremely portable. So that doesn't worry me at all, especially when you got a passer like Chris Paul who will be able to distribute the ball extremely well. And Booker is another guy who's usually a pretty off-ball scorer. His first few years, he was extremely ball dominant. But in recent years, he's been able to take a bit of a step back, play off ball a little bit more. I don't see why this shouldn't work.
I'm super interested to see the West because I want to see how they match up against, the Clippers. I would love to see a second-round matchup between Phoenix and Dallas, even though I think Phoenix could win. Just watching that would be incredible. There's so many different matchups that can happen now regarding the West where I don't know if there's going to be a series that, other than maybe the Denver Nuggets against the 8 seed, I feel like the 2-7, the 3-6, the 4-5, all of them, if you told me that the underdog team won, I probably wouldn't be that surprised because there's so many different matchups now in the West where it could go either way. And it's kind of just going to depend on how they're feeling that week or how they play that week. And I'm super excited to see it. Obviously, we won't see Durant come back until I believe after the All-Star break since he's injured right now. Devin Booker, I think just recently came back from just recently came back to the court.
Still playing limited minutes though.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think, and one thing I do want to agree with you on is that this notion that they lost all this depth. If any team in the league could trade Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and get back Kevin Durant, you're doing that 2-for-1 swap in a heartbeat. They keep saying like they lost all this depth. Jay Crowder wasn't playing. Like he didn't play a minute for them. They were running Torrey Craig and Jock Landale as their backup or as their power forward like center minutes when obviously alongside DeAndre Ayton. And it was working throughout the season. I mean, they've stayed in playoff contention. They've been up and down between the 3 through 6 seed, like every other team has in the West. And I don't see the big deal on giving up depth for Kevin Durant. Sure, maybe a guy like Darius Bazley is going to have a bigger role now, or Torrey Craig is going to have to play a lot more defense. But that's what you expect when you make these kinds of deals. And when it comes to Monty Williams, he's always been a very successful coach over his time. Obviously, we saw him underperform against Dallas last season, but I think that was just a team-wide thing. I don't think that can be blamed on any single person. Where Luka just came out and said, "I'm going to cook you guys," and I can't, and I wouldn't blame him if Luka did it again this year. Like I couldn't sit there and say the Suns are going to sweep the West. Like I can't say that because that's how stacked right now this Western Conference is. So I'm just excited because I get to see Kevin Durant really compete for a championship in the later years of his career, especially when before his injury, he was top 2, top 3 in MVP voting right before his injury. I mean, he was having a better season than arguably his OKC MVP season. And now we get to see him do that while competing for a championship. It's going to be awesome to watch.
100%. 100%. Before we end things up, because I got to go in a minute, there's one other team I want to talk about. It's not a team that you probably expect. I want to mention the Orlando Magic.
I love it.
In their last 31 games, the Orlando Magic are 18-13. They have been a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference over the last month and a half. I'm just putting that out there. Cool. They started off horribly. I think they were 2-15 in their first 17 or something like that.
5-20.
5-20. Yeah, something like that. They have flipped the switch. This is a team that has a lot of really, really good young pieces. And I watched them play, and they play really well together. And it's not like any one of these young guards has stepped up to become a superstar, because none of them have yet. But Suggs, Cole Anthony, Fultz, they play their roles. They interchange well. They play well together. Gary Harris has had a pretty good impact. Mo Wagner has been surprisingly a really good big man for them.
Really good.
Franz Wagner's had another good season. And Paolo is going to be the guy to carry them to the playoffs as soon as next year. And I know this is talking next year and everything, but I'm willing to say that the Magic will be a top 6 team in the Eastern Conference next year, led by Paolo Banchero. I mean, Wendell Carter too. I didn't even mention him. Bol, he's kind of fell off a little bit in the last couple of weeks. I know he's been a little injured, but he had a fantastic start to the year. I mean, this team has John Isaac. Love John Isaac. John Isaac.
Yep.
Even
finally playing.
He looks like he hasn't missed a beat in 3 years, which is ridiculous to say. But he comes out and he's hitting mid-range shots. He's hitting fadeaways. He's playing great defense. He looks just as good as he did on the day he stopped playing. I really love where this team is headed. They've looked great the rest of this season. Obviously, their start of the season was so bad that they're probably not going to compete for a play-in spot. Actually, I have the standings right here. I can check that up. They're the
13th seed.
Only 3 games. They're 3 games out of the play-in, which is roughly around where the Lakers are in the West. So, I'm really curious to see. Maybe this team could sneak in, but even if they don't, I think it's worth appreciating just how good they've been lately. I mean, they knocked off the Celtics 3 times. They knocked off the Sixers.
That's awesome.
They knocked off a big team the other night too. They knocked off the Nuggets with a fully healthy
Nuggets.
Team. Yep. Yeah.
And with Aaron Gordon going back to Orlando and having a 37-14 game, that wasn't even enough.
Yep. They knocked off the not only knocked off the Pelicans, they knocked off the Timberwolves. I mean, they're beating a lot of good teams. Just worth mentioning. I know it has nothing to do with the trade deadline, but I don't see anyone talking about it. So
I like it.
I just want to give them their respect. They have separated themselves from that lower tier of teams into that middle tier of teams.
100%. And then the last thing I just want to talk about really, really quickly. Were you surprised we saw a couple teams not make any moves? And I know it's, we talked about the Toronto Raptors. They made the move. We kind of don't know where they're sitting. But Miami Heat, Chicago Bulls, Washington Wizards. None of them really made any deals. Boston Celtics. Well, I mean, Mike Muscala. But when it comes to those, I'm looking more at the middle tier Eastern Conference teams because there's a bunch of them that are sitting within 4 games of each other that could make the playoffs, could make the play-in, yada, yada. Were you surprised to see teams like the Heat or the Bulls or the Wizards not make a deal, or would you have liked to see them make a deal?
I would like to see the Heat do something, especially. I think the Bulls and the Wizards, they're at a point where I think they know they're not competing. I was actually expecting them to even be more on the selling side rather than the buying side. Regardless, I think they've accepted their mediocre seasons this year. But the Heat are a team. They've had postseason success. They've looked good in the past. They have 2 superstars. You can even say
one shot away last year from making the finals.
1 shot away from making the finals last year. They were, you could argue, a couple injuries away from winning the finals in 2020. I mean, half their starting lineup was injured in that finals, and they still took it to Game 6. I don't know. This is a team that they've fallen off. This is not the team that they were last year or the last couple of years. I don't see them winning a playoff series. I mean, I think maybe they can give the Sixers or the Bucks some trouble in the first round, maybe steal a game or 2. But as currently constructed, these teams aren't good enough. This team isn't good enough to win it all. But I also feel like they're a piece or 2 away from being back at that level. So that is probably the main team that I'm disappointed. Not that I'm disappointed because it helps my Sixers out, but I really would have liked to see them make a move to compete in the East, especially with the Nets falling out.
Yeah, I keep thinking, it took a 2nd-round pick to trade for Darius Bazley. It took a 2nd-round pick to trade for Rui Hachimura. It took a 2nd-round pick to trade for Mason Plumlee. It took 5 first-round picks to trade for Jay Crowder. I don't understand the trade market. But those 3 guys I mentioned, Rui, Bazley, these are guys that could have come right in and played Plumlee could have played super impactful minutes for this Miami Heat team. And if that's what their trade value was, if I'm the Miami Heat, I know that my undrafted rookies, they play well every single season. Why are we not giving up 2 2nd-round picks that we could probably get back in return later for an undrafted guy like a Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, Hayward Highsmith? Why are we not giving these pieces up to go get a starting caliber power forward center next to Bam? Or even more like a better point guard play other than Kyle Lowry? Like, I feel like they were so zoned in on trying to trade Kyle Lowry, which didn't work, that they had no other plans. And that really surprised me, knowing that this team, Jimmy Butler, for some reason, he just, even with averaging under 20 points a game throughout the season, he finds ways to win come playoff time every time. Bam's having a great year. Just that really threw me off. Not seeing the Miami Heat involved in any single trade in the trade deadline.
Agreed.
But that's it. We got through pretty much every single deal. Really, really fun time, obviously. Backcourt Press podcast. We're going to try and obviously be a little bit more consistent. I say that every time, and then we'll probably go another month without doing a podcast. But if you're watching,
you can at least expect us back by the postseason.
Exactly. Stay tuned on our Instagram page. That's where we do a lot of the stuff. Zach is still keeping up with the Historian Project, his top 10 point guards of each season, which is still going strong. And then I'm doing the more of the current day stuff. But feel free to follow us on the Instagram page at Backcourt Press. Thank you to all the people that commented, especially Chris Simmons and Zach Goldman. You guys were fun, made the conversation more fun. Thank you. The 3 likes. Thank you guys for that. And honestly, it's just been fun talking basketball again with you, Zach. So we'll definitely do this again soon. We'll try and find some more times. But thank you all for watching. And that's our trade deadline talk. Have a great day.
Adios.